to the Maryland Crabs podcast with John Frenay and my dad, Tim Hamilton. Okay, there, I did it. Give me my phone back.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
It's the Maryland Crabs, and we have graduated recently in that we normally do our recording in kind of a makeshift studio in an unused room in John's house. But we're going back to our roots, and we are at a dirty kitchen table. I have not even washed this off for the last few days in preparation for this, so that we are in compliance with our opening.
That's very good.
Which I've been told is obnoxious.
So much just because your wife's out of town.
She is out of town, and we have some cleaning up to do before she gets back. Actually, she freaked out because she said, "You're bringing people into our house." I'm like, "Yeah." And she's German, so our house is kind of clean. And
hey, Kathy, if you're listening, it is spectacularly clean here. We're going to eat off the floor.
She seriously has called me twice from the road to make sure that the house is clean for John and our guest, Sean O'Neill, who second time?
This is my second time, yeah.
Yeah, second timer.
Yeah.
You got a Miller Lite for that.
I do, thank you.
Yeah.
Nice host.
Next year we need to get swag for multiple guests.
Like robes?
Well, yeah, like the Five Timers Club.
Yeah. Like a mouse pad for the second one, and maybe a sweatshirt or a t-shirt or a hoodie for this third time.
Well, because we want to do more hangout stuff, because those are ones that receive the best. We're just kind of hanging out and blathering on, solving the city's problems.
No, they're not. The one that received the best was my talk with Teddy Levitt. Don't forget that.
Yeah, you remind me quite a bit. I question those numbers, frankly. So we were called lefties by Red Maryland.
Well, you were, and I don't think that's fair. But that's
well, you're not left.
But thank you for listening, Greg.
No, I lean left. I'll admit that.
So both of you were called lefties?
Yeah, John's not a lefty.
I know.
Yeah,
that's funny.
I mean, I wouldn't think this even leans left. I mean, it's just sort of. I think it's fairly centric, maybe a little bit, but
yeah. Well, they were saying that in terms of Gavin's tax hike, because they said that even
lefties like the Maryland Crabs called him out on it.
Well, we had to, but I mean, yeah, we had to, because it was it was a campaign promise. I'm not calling him out in so much as that he raised taxes, because I don't see that he has a choice but to do that. But I think the question was that we had in our mind of you knew you were going to have to do that, so why be adamant about that in the campaign? Say you're not going to.
Valid point.
There's no way you can't not raise taxes. You have to. If we look at, I want to read this. So this is what, in a preparation, I actually did a little preparation for once.
Okay.
I rarely do that, but I'm going to break that right here. So this was a letter to the editor in the Capitol on Saturday. Is that right? No, Friday. And it's by Al Kirshner. Who's Al Kirshner?
He is the president of the Eastport Volunteer Fire Company, I believe.
Okay. I don't know him, but he's got a good name. So this is what he wrote about the Annapolis budgeting from Friday. Over 40 years ago, New York City Mayor Abe Beame handled the worst financial crisis in the city's history with clear, decisive action. The $600 million shortfall equated to 15% of the city's operating budget. Beame called in his cabinet and ordered a 15% across-the-board cut for all city agencies. Unpleasant? Yes. Fair? Maybe not. But Beame's decision put the problem where it belonged, in the hands of his department heads, the people who had the most understanding of their agency's operations and who were most likely to identify where cuts could be made with the least harm to safety and the well-being of the city's citizens. When Beame left office 2 years later, he'd erased the city's $1.5 billion overhaul debt and left a surplus of $200 million. With the hindsight of decades, historians and others have praised Mr. Beame for, as the New York Times wrote, allocating the city's diminished resources fairly and humanely. Here at home, we're witnessing a repeat performance of the mayor dumping an inflated budget into the laps of the city council for it to sort out and deal with. The council members are legislators, not program experts. Making the job of finding intelligent cuts and sensible realignments even more difficult is the fact that most city programs have no performance metrics to help sort out their effectiveness or real value. The council needs to send the mayor's budget back to him immediately with instructions to have his department heads take an across-the-board cut needed to balance the budget. The departments have the people and expertise to turn that task around quickly and competently. Al Kirshner, Annapolis. So I was thinking about that. So what he's proposing is, And what they did in New York back in the 70s was a 15% cut. So what he's proposing is a $15 million increase, right, with the taxes. And what Mr. Kirshner is saying send the budget back to the mayor and tell the department heads, cut 15% and then bring it back to us.
Well, he's got some good points there in that, the department heads are the ones that know about the operation of the city. I mean, no offense to Ross Arnett, but he doesn't know. Certainly Mark Rodriguez, anybody on the council is not intimately familiar with how it works. I mean, they just see this budget once a year, and at the end of the year, they say, oh, we blew that.
Well, let's say, and with some exceptions too, he did say we're witnessing a repeat performance of the mayor dumping an inflated budget in the laps of city council for them to sort out and deal with it. I don't think they ever sort out and deal with it. They'll kind of complain about it, but in the end, it's going to get passed. We all know that. Yeah,
there's very little shifting around through the thing typically, but I agree. I think Gavin's problem was that he came out with this, okay, we're going to raise the taxes, and he had nothing else. And I think that it has to be a combination. And I'll be the first to admit that the lion's share is going to come from taxes. I think everybody realizes that. Everybody knows that. We can't raise fees. We can't cut services to the degree to make up what we need to get with the financial situation of the city. However, it seems that he's come out and said, we've got a deficit and here's how we're going to do it. It's taxes. Period.
Well, you have to understand where the city makes its money. It's the vast majority of it is property taxes.
Right.
They don't get a sales tax. They get very little income tax. And the fees are only allowed to cover the services in which you're being charged for. They can't exceed what you're being charged for. So,
we go back to that. I didn't know that. What does that mean?
So basically, if it costs $100,000 a year to run the permit office, then you divide the fees that you would traditionally have. Let's say you have normally, I guess if it's $100,000 and you've got 25 permits a year, that's $4,000 a permit, right?
So they anticipate how many of the permits or how many applications the fee is going to be made in that year, and they divide the total number to run that program by that number.
Yep.
It's the same thing with water. It's. I'm trying to remember the term of it that it's used, but I mean it's got to sort of self-sustain itself, and it's got to be able to generate the fees to cover their costs.
I know idea about that. I thought you could pretty much arbitrarily just raise fees to whatever you wanted to.
No, because then it's a tax. So you would call it a tax at that point. So a fee has to be for service. So and that's what you're paying for. So all liquor license fees should cover all the costs that have to do with issuing liquor licenses,
which is inspections and everything else that they do. And whatnot there.
Exactly.
And there are some that are wiggle worthy. Okay, the membership at the Pitt Moyer Rec Center. That's got some wiggle room there.
Yeah, you could raise that fee if the cost of the rec center is losing money versus the income.
Right.
You could raise those fees, or you could cut services, whatever. But you have to keep in mind that there's very little that the very few places that the city has in order to get revenue in general. And so when you look at it, that's the only thing really that the mayor can do to probably raise money. Now, if they could save a lot of money by eliminating the police department and fire department and merging it with the county.
I've been kind of a fan of that for a while.
And I'm not saying we do it. I'm just saying that's an option. Do we really need to have our own fire department? In fact, we still use the county's fire inspectors to inspect all of our buildings anyway for code.
Health inspector does as well.
Exactly. So you start to wonder if we're really into the we're going to save money mode, then we could go down that road.
And I do think that Gavin needed to come out with something other than taxes. Whether it's I've asked all of my department heads to seek 5%, maybe not as ridiculous as the 15% that New York was looking for.
You think that's ridiculous?
What, 15?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, keep in mind, New York's crime spiked dramatically during that time period.
The 70s were ridiculous.
70s were horrible for New York.
Yeah.
I mean, not until Giuliani came back. I don't know where he came from. But until he got into the office, did the crime rate start to fall.
Yeah, my brother said that. He goes, like him or hate him, he said, because he lives in Manhattan, he said he really did clean up the city.
He did. And so, you have to keep in mind that things come with there's consequences when you start making requests like that. So now I'm not a fan of the way that they went about it. possibly raising taxes, but it probably should have been done the last couple of years, to be honest, because the shell game that they were playing in City Hall you knew it was going to come to an end.
Well, we said that too, and I think that's
been going on for years.
Yeah, but that's something that Jared has always said, is that someone's going to be left holding the bag at some point. It looks like that it's Gavin who's holding the bag, because I know that Mike had pointed out and said that he hadn't raised taxes during his administration. I don't think that is something that you should be really kind of boasting about at that point, because we're in a situation right now that a lot of cities our size and cities in general are facing right now. Look at Harrisburg. They tried to declare bankruptcy and they were sued because they didn't have any more money because of the liabilities they had for their employment retirement and the benefits that they had promised to the public service unions. They were in a bad way. And we're not unique, but we're in the same situation. But no one has done anything to alleviate the situation. So someone's going to be left holding the bag. That's why I think my criticism isn't that he raise taxes, because someone had to do it. But my criticism was, you can't promise people you're not going to do it and then do it, because it was unrealistic to promise that. It was. I mean, what else are you going to do? Like you said. So I'm looking right now there was an article in the Capitals, Our Say, that hit, I guess, this morning, and that was Rick Hutzel.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, he had a good point. He said, I'm quoting him now, philosophically, it's unlikely that someone who owns a $3.5 million home in Eastport is going to abandon the city for a few $100s more a year. So, I mean, people can squawk about it, but in the end, you're not going to drive people away. You're not going to drive people out. So
it's actually be a couple thousand more.
Is it that much?
On a $3.5 million house, your taxes are going to be $35,000. So you're going to pay another $7,000 or $8,000 in taxes on that.
I mean, it may not drive people out, but it certainly would be a consideration on new people coming in.
Now, one thing he said, and I think I had talked about this before, and Rick had suggested Annapolis could seek permission from the state to institute a local sales tax. 2 cents on the dollar would generate millions over the course of time.
I mean, that would be a great idea to do it. But
I don't know.
But the whole issue, when I say it'd be a great idea to do it, it'd be a great idea to solve the budget problem, but it would drive businesses out of town. I mean, why would I?
I've thought about this. I hear what you're saying.
Well, hold on. Before you start, though, I don't know if he's right. I don't know. I think constitutionally, through the state's charter, I don't think we can.
Yes, you can.
Can you?
Yeah. I mean, there's no reason that they couldn't do that. The reason that they don't is just that you figure about it. I mean,
I don't know if you can.
Why?
Because I talked to
the governor. It has to be approved by the state. But yeah, you can certainly do that.
Does anyone else do it in the state?
I haven't seen it anywhere else in the state.
When I lived in Albuquerque, we lived there for a few years. And they did have the ability to institute a local sales tax.
Yeah.
And they did. But the problem with that was that all of a sudden they were adding on, it's sort of like they had a credit card. They just started throwing on like quarter-cent taxes on, they wanted to have a new cultural center. And like, all right, well, institute another quarter-cent tax. And they kept doing that.
O'Malley did that when he raised the tax from, what was it, 5.5% to 6%?
5 to 6.
5 to 6%. It was, it depends on how you look. I mean, it's how they spun this whole tax increase. Oh, it's only 13 cents per $100 of assessed value. And other people look and say, okay, well, it's a $9 million tax hike. And another one says it's so there's any number of ways to look at it. But the problem with instituting a tax, the consumer, okay, if I buy $100 worth of stuff in Annapolis, and now it's going to cost me $107 because there's a 1% sales tax boost for Annapolis. Why would I want to be in Annapolis to buy my widget for $100 when I can go to Pearl Town Center and get it for $106?
Right.
I mean, I can park easier. It's no further for me.
Well, that's why I've always said that what they should do is the state should take 5%, and then the local government should take 1%, so the 6%. And the reason I say that is because then you can measure the economy locally by some sort of metric. We can look at the numbers and say, our income is down 10% for the year through income taxes. What is it that's going on? What is it that we're missing out on? Oh, but look at the mall, or look at this part of the county or this part of the state. Their numbers are actually up. What are they doing right? So I think that if both parties were sort of working together, maybe that would make a lot of sense. And maybe that's a solution, so that instead of the pilot program, the pay in lieu of tax program, that's a way that the city can make back some of its money.
So one of the suggestions Rick also had there was, we collect a local income tax, but we could create our own. Anne Arundel collects a local income tax. So Annapolis could create its own, which I don't think so. I think it's a non-starter.
Right.
But also, I think he goes to what most municipalities do. He said we can tax people who don't live here. And the tourists get soaked wherever you go, the hotel tax,
Yep.
the car tax. And there's all these taxes, when you leave an airport and you enter an airport, all these things. And I guess the thought process with that is they'll squawk about it, but
they have no choice.
Right. They have no choice.
I mean, you got to see your kid graduate, right?
Exactly. And plus, you don't see those taxes. I mean, those taxes are all kind of bare. I never look at that when I go to San Francisco or I go to Chicago, and I don't. I look at just the bottom line.
I mean, if you look at an airfare, there's airfare from BWI to London is $125. The airfare. Okay, then you've got the landing charge. You've got the landing charge in Heathrow. You've got the landing charge here in Baltimore. You've got the federal tax. You've got the international tax. You've got the everything else, but it's all bundled in. And the airlines say no, this is so that's how it gets up to be $699 to go.
Well, that's why I always thought it was cowardly whenever you have politicians and they pass these taxes on telecommunications, on your cable bill or anything else, because they know damn well that they're just going to pass it on to the consumer. So rather than taxing the consumer directly, it's just an indirect tax because that way they can say, well, we're taxing the big bad cable company, knowing that they're going to raise the price to compensate.
I would, if I were mayor, I might see what kind of pressure I could put on the county and the feds for the property that they own and the state to say, you guys need, we're hurting. You need to cough up a little bit more. Maybe you need to pay, a fixed rate per assessed value of your buildings.
Yeah, I mean, a third of the downtown Annapolis is nonprofit property. And
I don't know what the city does for, what services is the city providing to the state, the feds, or the county that are sort of above and beyond a normal business.
Well, it's always said, people, whenever we talk about the level of staffing that the city has, it's always said over and over saying, well, we are a capital city, so we have needs that other cities our size don't. And I frankly don't see that. I think, if you look at the buildings, like Sean just said, where you're saying that those buildings and that property is not taxable, okay, that's true. But when you look at the services that we provide, I can't think of that many. They have their own police department over at the Capitol Police. They have
the Naval Academy does. The county has their county police, but again, we provide police service to the 44 Arundel Center.
Yeah,
they've got their own guards in the building and stuff like that. But again, that's something that's additional there.
I just think it's always been used as an excuse why we have a staff as large as we do, and we do. We keep coming back to that because we go back to the cuts. Do we need a staff that's this large? Now, again, I think I've always said that going, well, we're huge, but then if you take out the police, fire, and transportation, then I think those numbers go back to where they should be.
Yeah, very manageable.
So maybe it's not that bloated of a government. It's just that we have departments that are in our city that most cities our size don't have.
Yep.
So maybe it's not a bloated bureaucracy. It's just that we shouldn't have these departments.
Yeah, and the harbor master. That's
true.
Another whole department.
I think that we should be able to. You look at Steve Shue just announced that he's thrown into his. He's in his. Hey, look, we're going to throw in the budget because it's a election year mode. But the Lock Haven Boulevard and Central Avenue, it's been a bottleneck for the Mayo Peninsula. He said, okay, we're going to throw $2.75 million into widen it to make right turns and left turns and everything else and alleviate the congestion on there. What would happen if the county, the state, and the feds each contributed $2.75 million a year to Annapolis?
Right.
There's your budget issue.
True.
Yeah.
The amount that we're talking about relative to the people that use our services, this county, the state, and the feds, is negligible to
What's
them.
our deal with the Naval Academy?
They pay for water, and I don't know if they make a payment in lieu of tax. That's a good question.
Because that's significant. I guess you're right. If you look at the number of buildings downtown that we can't tax, that is significant.
Yeah. It's a third of downtown Annapolis, of Ward 1, basically.
And the other thing that's the question is over, in your neck of the woods is the stadium, because that's owned by a private entity. It's not owned by the federal government.
Right. But yet there's for-profit entities that use it, and they don't pay entertainment tax, which is millions of dollars that basically the city's missing out on. Mm-hmm. And that's gone to court a couple times. But they've always gone to court when they've sued, I think they've sued the Naval Academy saying, you need to pay us this tax. But they never went to court over a for-profit entity using the nonprofit stadium's property.
Right.
So that'd be interesting to see what would happen there. Maybe that's an opportunity. Like the Bayhawks, they don't pay anything or let's put it this way. The people that attend Bayhawks games don't pay an entertainment tax. Where if you go to a show at Rams Head, you got to pay a 10% tax.
And why not?
Because it's at the Naval Academy, which is a nonprofit.
Gotcha.
And AAA property, Naval Academy Athletic Association property, which is nonprofit.
So ultimately, I think him raising taxes, this was the time to do it right after the election because it's early on in the administration and it'll be a distant memory in 3.5 years.
Right. And then keep in mind, all of our assessed values are going to go up next year, so they can cut the rate state that they're cutting taxes next
but
year.
But
the number stays the same, and you're looking at it going, wait a minute, I'm still paying $4,500. My tax rate didn't go down.
People pay attention to that. I mean, I always say that there's a certain amount of wonks in town, and we're among them that kind of paid attention to this. We watch the city council meetings, but most people don't. They see the number goes up, they're like, what the hell is this? But after a few months, that's just what you're paying.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't think it. I think it just kind of stems the bleeding a little bit. I think we're still in pretty deep. I mean, we have a lot of liabilities that we still got to handle.
Oh, this is just the drop in the bucket. What's going to happen later on? I mean, the federal government's losing $1 trillion a year too. So get ready for higher taxes all across the board.
And again, you're looking at cuts in services too.
Yeah, probably.
That always irked me about 10 years ago when we went from 2 collections a year, or 2 collections a week when it came to trash, down to 1.
Oh, yeah.
And so they had...
Well, the first volley was the elimination of the curbside leaf
Don't
sucking.
get me started.
You guys had that? We never had that.
Oh, it was great.
I'm counting.
It was great. You just raked it out into the curb and...
I never liked that though. They have that over in Bethesda, and those leaves just sit there for weeks.
I could rake my lawn in half a day. Now it takes me a day and a half because I got to put them in the damn bags.
How old are you kids?
He does it now. You're right.
Yeah. You're angry for him.
But needless to say, when I was doing it, it really irked me when I had to take that much more time. I have some pretty big trees in my backyard, and I fill my entire curb about 5 bags high, 30 long. So it's like, I don't know, 100 bags.
But that's a perfect example we're talking about is that, they cut a service and you're furious about it. And there's a lot of letters to the editor and everything. And after a few months, it's gone. It's just the way it is. That's how it was when we talk about the trash collection. I was livid because they sent a person to every community from the county to say, hey, we have a new cost saving measure that we're going to take. And you're like, great. Are we getting a break in taxes? And they said, no. So basically you're telling us that the county's going to save money, but I'm going to get less service and I'm going to pay the same.
Right.
That's a great deal. And it is a pain.
Yeah.
Especially if you're paying for it. But I mean, I think you're going to see that happen on a city level. You're going to see it happen certainly on a federal level because people said we're $1.2 trillion we're losing that this tax cut's going to cost. So they're talking about, look at the, Medicare, Medicaid.
Yep.
These are all things that they're going to have to cut. They're not going to have any choice but to do it.
Actually, I was reading an article the other day that you can fix Social Security till the year 2080 by just raising it 1% for the employer and 1% for the employee, the Social Security tax. And they haven't raised the Social Security tax since early 80s.
I've just resolved myself to the fact I've never seen it.
So, but you could fix it very easily, but you have to do it today. 5 years ago, it was 0.5%. So the longer they wait, the higher that tax is going to be. So, but fix it today. I mean, none of us are going to miss 1%, right? I mean, we can live with that. But for some reason, there's people in Congress that signed a pledge that said, I'm not going to raise taxes, and they hold themselves to that pledge. So,
speaking of money pits, so we're about 3 weeks away from the market house opening.
That's what they say.
Yeah, that's what I hear. They're advertising as far as looking for help.
My expectations are muted.
They want beer servers, they said. So apparently that liquor license went through fine.
Oh, wait a minute, did it?
I don't know. I haven't been watching.
They said they were looking for servers for alcohol. So
that would be a game changer, though.
Well, yeah, you can get a beer with your oysters, right? I mean, isn't that how it's supposed to be?
You know, I'm just thinking though. I was going through my head because I think it's become just a symbol. We've talked about the market house for hours on this podcast when you think about it. But if you look at the last incarnation that they had, it wasn't that bad. I mean, they had oysters. People say, well, you used to be able to go down there and get oysters. Well, you could do that for the last couple of years, go down and get oysters.
Yeah.
They had pizza, they had everything. So I'm just thinking I don't know if they can just make it work. I don't want to sound negative, but.
Well, the dynamic of a market house has changed. I don't think a market house as a market is going to work there. I mean, you've got so much that's going against it. You've got parking, you've got accessibility. Ours certainly worked into it into a degree. And we evolved into a citizenry that wants convenience. I mean, I want to be able to pull up and walk in and get my thing without having to walk very far. So I just don't think it is. So, I mean, I think it's got a fighting chance, certainly, because it's a different concept. It's not something that we've seen here before. And everything up to this point, I think, has really been trying to reimagine, to use a current term, of what's going on in, what it was back in 1996.
How much of it's romanticized, though? We, as a city, we tend to do that. We tend to romanticize things and remember them not as they were, but as we wish they were.
Well, they do.
I mean, Annapolis, Mayor Existence does that.
It was a dingy, dirty kind of a place, but it served a purpose and people liked it.
Yeah, I guess.
It wasn't always full, though. I mean,
that's what I'm starting to think.
I lived right around the corner from there. I'd run down there, get a burger, and I never had to wait in line. If it was that.
Well, the way it was laid out also made it look full, whether anybody was in there or not, because you had all those little different booths and,
Yeah.
I'm just starting to wonder if, as a people here, we just don't romanticize things. Like, whenever I hear people, letters the editor about kids today, millennials are like, what happened like when we were kids and we didn't lock the doors? I'm like, it's safer now than it's ever been. Like 1984 was the most dangerous it's ever been for this country and for kids in this country. And since then, crime's gone steadily down. But people will talk about how safe it was and how wonderful everything was. I'm starting to think the same with the Market House. I lived here. Let's see, it was 2003 that it was flooded. So I'd been here for 5 years. So I remember I went to it and it was good, but I don't remember it like Sean just said. I don't remember it ever being like thriving and teeming. Like, there was always people in it, but
yeah, there was a lot of things that really led to the downturn for the Market House, and
it's like people romanticize Times Square.
Yeah,
and they're just like, oh, it's so sanitized now. It's like Disney. I like when it was gritty and real. I'm like, did you really? Because
the peep shows.
It was kind of shitty. Yeah.
No, wait a minute. Let's not cut out the peep shows. They weren't too.
Well, I don't know if you guys remember. I wrote an article in the Capitol a number of years ago. I guess it was a couple years ago now, about what has changed since the Market House it was successful. You had the hospital leave, and that's thousands of people.
Oh, the downtown one.
Yeah, that used to be coming downtown, and they would run down to the Market House. They took the hour lunch break. I think it was William Donald Schaefer that took the hour lunch break and made it a half hour for state workers. Employees. So that made it really hard for them to get downtown. They used to go downtown to the Market House all the time. And then on top of that, you got rid of the oyster boats. So, when you look at all of those different things, I think that's what happened. So you have to create something that's so magical down there that it's a destination and people want to come.
Well, you've also got to figure that the competition, there's nothing really, Sperry and the whatever knickknack shops are right there on Market Space. There's very little retail outside of restaurants there.
Right.
So, you're automatically going into competition. One thing I thought was kind of interesting, I was talking to somebody the other day who the suggestion was made going to Metropolitan to have a drink. And they were very upset that Gavin had won this election. And they're like, oh, no, absolutely. We won't ever go into any one of his restaurants. And I wonder how prevalent that might be. Now, granted, obviously the Republicans, I'm presuming this Republican is a minority in the town. But I'd be curious to see whether his election has had any effect on the bottom line of any of his restaurants. And I wonder, looking into the Market House, whether his non-affiliation with it will have anything to do with it.
I don't know. The one thing I will say that's nice about the way they're going about this Market House is that it's one landlord managing the whole thing. And so if they want to make a change, because keep in mind, Met at one time was before it was Met, it was a Spanish or a Mexican restaurant. Before that, it was a Jerry's Seafood, and before that, it was a Met, and they did a flipperoo seriously in 3 days from the Jerry's Seafood into the Mexican,
right? And
then they did it again into a Metropolitan back to a Met. Because they knew what would work, or they wanted to try something new because what they thought would work didn't work. Right. So they have the ability to do that with the Market House, and you're not having to evict a vendor and wait, and put it through city council.
They're nimble.
Yeah. So there is probably more opportunity for success right now, given the model that they're going with, and Jody will figure it out. Jody's a smart guy.
Yeah, no, he's not dumb.
I like so this is how in 2016, Sean starts his article. In a college course, quote, Geology of the Grand Canyon, unquote, I learned that this wonder of the world was formed not by one event, but a series of phenomena. Erosion, earthquakes, glaciers, continental drift, and even volcanoes. The current lackluster state of the Market House on City Dock is similarly the result of a series of events.
That's exactly
Look at you.
I love that class.
It's so poetic.
We got to hike the Grand Canyon.
But there's some things in town.
Welcome to our guest, James Joyce.
Yeah. There's some things in town that just don't work. I think the Market House, this is the 5th incarnation since 2003. Right?
Well, let's see. You had the original. Are you starting with the original?
Okay, let's start with that.
All
right, so the original. And then you had the bowling alley food court, right?
Yeah. Which had killer pizza.
But you had the one that came in with the air conditioners that opened up.
Oh, then they had to close it, right?
They closed it. Then there was the Dean and DeLuca thing. Then there was one that briefly worked.
There was never a Dean and DeLuca.
Well, during that time when they were supposed to come in, it was Site Realty that had it.
Oh, Site Realty, that's who it was. Yes. So they had it after the original.
And then Josh opened it up when he jumped into the harbor. And there was like a little hamburger place that was in there. There was the deli. Chicken Roost was down in there.
Oh, yeah. So they filled it with just knick-knack odd
there was like a map store, the Whimsy Cove map from West Annapolis.
Right. And from what I understood, the rumor at the time was that Governor O'Malley was ticked off by the whole thing. He said, just get it filled. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but
really.
But so it's probably, 6 incarnations we're talking about. So this is the 7th.
There's a number of them.
So that's where I looked at was each one of those executed clumsily? Because I would contend that with the exception of the air conditioners, which was a stupid mistake that cost a lot of money and no one ever was called out for.
Yeah.
But that notwithstanding, I think most of them were pretty much acceptable. There was nothing that I went in going, what are they thinking? I mean, maybe the first one. That was just kind of stupid. So that kind of makes me a little pessimistic about this latest one because I just wonder if it's not going to work there. Sort of like the restaurant where Phillips was, where the yacht club is now. No restaurant has ever worked there. Phillips was a bomb. That Hell Point Seafood was a bomb. The British place was a bomb.
Yeah, ever since Mr. Phillips that owned it. What was the place that used to be there for years and years and years?
Before Phillips?
Harbor House.
Yeah,
that was there for decades, and he did well. But
I'm just wondering at some point, when do you just say, you know what, we've tried everything we possibly can. Let's just pave this sucker. Maybe 5 years ago when people were talking about selling, I'm like, oh, come on, this is iconic. And right now I'm like, you know what? It won't work. And I hope to be proven wrong. I really do. And I think the beer, that's going to be a game changer.
Yeah. And it's just beer and wine. I don't think they're selling liquor or anything like that.
And it's a midnight, so it's not like a 2 a.m.
Right.
And that I would be willing to bet would be up for change at some point. They would probably look for a later one and a full liquor license, I would think.
Who knows?
What do you think about the restaurateurs who are bitching about the subsidies?
I'm really surprised that there was not more of a pushback. When all of the initial proposals came in, and this was coming in from, Mary Giolitti, and everybody else, every single one of them had alcohol involved in that. And if I owned any one of those restaurants along there, a hot dog stand. The Market House, as it was a competitor to Pips. It was a hot dog stand.
Yeah.
It wasn't a competitor to McGarvey's. It wasn't a competitor to Middleton's or to Woodfire or whatever it's called now. Harvest Wooden Grill and Tap. It wasn't a competitor even to Buddy's, which is just mediocre tourist food. But it is a competitor now that they're serving beer.
Well, they've been squawking. Some of the restaurateurs have been squawking about the subsidies or the subsidized rent that they're paying. And I've been trying to decide if they have a point or not.
I didn't see too many restaurants squawking about that. There were a number of residents that were squawking about it.
I think, I'm trying to remember who it was. There was someone.
Bill Kardash was very clear about it. It says, I've looked at the rents. And, I agree. It needs to be subsidized to a degree. Is it where it should be? I don't know. But I think certainly there's some value in letting Jody take a risk.
Well, I think here's where subsidy comes into place. If you're offering a government service, you're going to take a loss on that government service almost all the time. There's not a transportation department in this country that makes any money. They all lose money. They're all subsidized because that's how it is. Whenever someone says we have to run government like a business, government isn't meant to be run like a business. You can't do it. You're offering a service for the taxes paid. So I think any business owner who has a restaurant and they look at the numbers and they say, our busiest time is from 11 a.m. till 4 p.m. And after that, it drops like a stone. And you say, no, I want this to be open until 7 or 8. A business owner say, well, no, we can't because we don't have the money, the businesses to sustain that. But government says, no, we're going to keep it open because that it's an amenity to our citizens. So that's where I think the subsidy comes in, going, look, we know that you're taking a risk and we want you open a certain amount of time or a certain set of hours. You're not going to be making money in that time, so why don't we give you the subsidy in the form of a rent?
I don't know. I think when you break that building down, there's not that much area that you're actually paying for that you're renting. There's a lot of that building is public space.
Yeah, there's no storage that I know of.
Right.
Is there a basement yet?
There's no storage. There's no basement. You have to have somewhere else to A, prep the food, and B, store things. So you have to have someone that has another restaurant or another location nearby.
Right. Which is why Chicken Roost was ideally that's
it was great for them because they could run the stuff up the street or down the street and they could use the primary location.
It was good for Harvey Blonder and Buddy's right across the street.
Yep. And so you also have to keep in mind that place is cursed, and so a lot of people are just going to say, Market House, I'm not going there. So they have to work extra hard to try to win people over. And I don't think it's an unfair rent that they're being charged. I think it's very fair. And you also have costs. It's not unusual if you are renting a location and you have to make upgrades. You get a
subsidized rent, sure.
Yeah, you get subsidized rent.
You get a build out. If you've got to build it out,
So I don't think there's anything unusual. In fact, I think some of the city's demands were unusual, which made it very tough on Jody when he was going through lease negotiations. I mean, he just kept.
Well, the one thing I think that is very encouraging about it, and as you mentioned, Sean, I mean, Jody is very nimble. They can flip things around, and they know about marketing. Okay, when Metropolitan Latin Quarter, Jerry's Metropolitan went through its thing. I mean, they are arguably one of the most popular bar restaurants in town on the very upper end of West Street. And they did a really good job of marketing themselves.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that the Market House has never done a good job. I know when they had Richard Cheroff, who is sort of managing it.
Right.
I mean, their idea of marketing was like, all right, well, we've got the flags. We'll hang them.
Right.
Here's some balloons.
And here's some flyers.
It was like there was nothing. And I'm not saying that they've got to go into this multi-million-dollar ad campaign and blitz and whatnot. But I mean, they've changed up their menu. That's, hey, take an ad out in the Capitol and say, hey, the Market House has their new fall menu out.
Right.
Something like that. Get into the Facebook. I mean, I know you say the Facebook ads are the best value out there.
I think so, yeah.
Absolutely.
Especially for local businesses.
To turn around and get there and do it. Be out there. Don't build it and hope they're going to come. And I don't see Jody doing that.
You don't see him being out there marketing on this?
No, I don't see him taking we'll just build it and everybody will come.
Oh, no. Yeah, he's not like that.
No.
So, yeah, they'll come up with different ideas. And, he's got people on his team that have ideas. And
I think that wet T-shirt contest on Fridays is like awesome.
I mean, it's throwback, right?
Yeah.
On that note, why don't we take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about cannabis, we'll talk about Trump coming to town, and we'll talk about a mutual friend of ours.
Oh.
Hey, it's May, and it's Maryland Podcast Month. No, Hallmark didn't invent this puppy, so there's no need to get a card, but do yourself a favor and give a listen to some of the other Maryland-based podcasts. Our right-wing friends, hey, they called us liberals first, at Red Maryland have put together a website called MarylandPodcastMonth.com, and it lists all of the podcasts that are participating this month. Throughout the month of May, many of us will be showing up on other Maryland podcasts as guests, and we'll have all sorts of antics throughout the month. Among the participants are Red Maryland and Ion Annapolis, of course, and then others to cover every topic you can possibly think of. Podcasts such as Quality Time, The Maryland Crabs, A History of Maryland, The Conduit Street Podcast, Laugh Finder, The Extra Point Show, Society Fringe Players, The Mark and Lowell Show, The Engine Mom Podcast, and quite a few more. So go to MarylandPodcastMonth.com, check it out, get familiar with a new podcast near you, and of course, please let all your friends and associates know as well. And we will see you all May during Maryland Podcast Month.
When you're a community bank, you help your community however you can. Like being there for local business people, backing them up when they start up, advising them when they ask, standing by them so they can grow. Helping local businesses is one of the most important things we do at Severn Bank. I'm Alan Hyatt, chairman of the bank, but I'm also a proud supporter of businesses in Anne Arundel County. You know we never forget that here at the bank, we're a local business too. We face the same challenges and opportunities as any business, and we know how fortunate we are to have customers who stand beside us. That's why we stand beside you. If you have a business or you want to start a business, talk with us, because we're banking on you. Severn Bank, here with you.
Online at severnbank.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. Severn Bank is a trade name used by Severn Savings Bank.
And we're back after going on an epic Trump rant during the break.
Yes, we did.
That is where we are left. Yeah, I would say. So Red Maryland has us on that. But I think a lot of Republicans would agree with us. He's coming to town.
He is.
It's funny. I had to laugh at all the Facebook posts about how they want to protest him and line the parade route and everything. I said, he's not coming for a parade, people. He's coming for the Naval Academy grad. Oh, well, they're going to turn his back on him. I'm like, no, they're not.
No, they're not. That's Commander-in-Chief.
I mean, this is going to be probably one of the most friendly audiences, naturally friendly audiences that he's had. And I'm like, he helicopters in. He doesn't take a motorcade. It's not a big, huge one anyway. I mean, he's got less than half a mile to go.
Right.
And
where does he land for this?
Hospital Point. They come right out of Gate 8 up in West Annapolis, down Row, and into and under the stadium.
But he may stop at 7-Eleven for a Slurpee on the way.
Hit a McDonald's.
True.
Yeah.
True.
People were all worked up about it, and I get it. I can't stand the guy. But that said, it's not abnormal. I felt the same way when he didn't attend Barbara Bush's funeral, and he was just getting shredded for that. I'm like, yeah, but no president, I don't think since 1960.
I did read an article, and they said that it's, I don't say tradition, but no sitting president has attended the funeral of
it kills me to defend the guy,
former first lady, because the brouhaha that has to accompany with him, just by nature of his office as a sitting president.
He was supposed to speak last year, actually, if you look at the pattern of...
Yeah, he went to the Italy for the G7. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That he had to do. I don't think that it was... I think he was planning to, and that's when Pence stepped in.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that, though, sometimes. Like, when you think that things are crazy and you're looking and go, this is just an insane administration, which they are. But to an extent, a lot of this stuff is normal and it becomes denormalized. Like, for example, it would be odd if he didn't lose the House in the middle of his first term. That's just what happens.
Yeah, that's the pattern.
I mean, they're talking about the blue wave, which I think is fairly optimistic, but they're saying it's an indictment on the Trump presidency. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it would be odd if he didn't lose the House.
Right.
That happens virtually. I would say that's happened every president I can remember, right?
Yeah, it happened for Clinton. It happened for Bush.
Reagan.
I
don't know about Carter. Wait, he didn't have...
He didn't have a re-election. Well, that was a weird time because keep in mind that was after Nixon and Ford, and so Carter was he was the blue wave at the time.
So that's what I kind of think about is that when everyone freaks out, and the tendency is to freak out and just go, what's normal and what's not, so, and I hate having to defend him. I do, but it's also when people get hysterical and also reading into it. He's the president. He's going to come talk to the Naval Academy grads, and that's what he's supposed to do.
My only wish is that he doesn't make it about him.
Why would you think that?
That's what we're going to be betting on.
I know it's a wish. It's a wish, okay? But the best speakers make it about the midshipmen.
Absolutely.
And last year, Pence was, but the Secretary of the Navy did a fantastic job.
Yes.
And so, I saw George Bush Sr. speak years ago, and he did a really good job, but he was a Navy guy.
I think he's the most underrated president in my lifetime. I think of
George
he did? H.W.
You know what he did that was really cool? He shook the hand, and most of them do this. He shook the hand of every midshipman, well, ensign, I guess at that point, that crossed the stage, and the very last one, he took off his watch and handed it to him.
Did he really?
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah. I thought that was really cool.
George Zip.
Yeah,
exactly. I think the policy is that you've got the president will shake the hands of the top of the class and then sits back, but they can obviously override it. I know Obama sat there, and I remember it was fairly warm, and Obama sat there and he shook every single midshipman's hand.
I think Pence shook everyone's hand last year.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
I think the policy is that you can step back after the top what percentage of it goes, but it's the thing with Trump though is we're going to have great bets on to when he launches from the thing into like, oh, I'm great.
Oh, yeah.
It was like when Biden was here. It was like, okay, how many minutes into his speech are we going to get a Biden blunder? And it was quick. We all lost out on that. It was like, he says, oh, I love Annapolis, man. Nothing better than getting a beer at McGreevy's. Everyone's going, scratch. McGreevy's. Oh, McGarvey's. I got you.
Do you think Trump has a support of most military? I mean, obviously he's the commander in chief, but I mean, do you think that they're all pretty much fans? I tend to think so.
I think the enlisted, maybe. I think the officers, less than half. Because the officers tend to be a little bit more educated, and they understand far more about the depth of policies. It's
not hard.
It's deeper than just saying something. And I would bet that maybe half of the officers, but he probably has a lot of the enlisted men.
Yeah, I tend to think that. I mean, someone said that on the eSport forum. They said, I have a feeling that a lot of backs can be turned. I said, would hardly think so.
Yeah, they wouldn't do that.
No, that would be a
I mean, there's still honor. You have to keep in mind.
Yeah,
they took an oath, and there is an element of honor. And actually, it's
the office.
strongest
It's not necessarily the individual.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Exactly.
So one of our friends, speaking of elected officials, wait, he hasn't been elected despite all his efforts. So since Sean's here, that's the first thing that popped in my mind is Dan Bongino, our old buddy Dan Bongino. So Sean and I have both been blocked from his Twitter. I'm still good on it.
And you know what? And the funny thing is, I made one correction to something that he tweeted, and I can't even remember because it's been a year. And it was something that he tweeted, and I just said, "Well, that's not true. This is the real answer." And next thing I know, I'm blocked.
Well, I said something is your new hobby losing elections, and then that pretty much.
Oh, that would do it.
Yeah. So Dan Bongino, he was a Secret Service officer. I don't know.
Yeah, he was a Secret Service agent,
and he lived here. And matter of fact, we met him. Remember that?
Yeah. I have. I mean, he's loud and he's a hothead and whatnot. I don't have necessarily a problem with him. But I'm
he's
not
the polar opposite of what a Secret Service agent is supposed to be.
He's on Fox and Friends all the time, and on The View, or not The View, the Five, or Outnumbered. He's always on Outnumbered on Fox. I hate watch Fox, but he was a Secret Service agent, and he decided he was going to run for Congress. Third district, maybe
out in Western Maryland, right?
Was it? I don't know what it was, but so he was running, and so John and I met him about 4 or 5 years ago or maybe 6 years ago at Tweetmasters. We'd get together and talk about social media and stuff, and we had a bunch of speakers, and then so he was one of the speakers. It was him and Josh Cohen and the guy who ran BG&E's.
Laura Newman?
Laura Newman. So they were all on the panel. So it was funny because everyone was kind of laid back and they're just kind of like, well, we tweet occasionally and we like to use Twitter. And he's like, I look at the metrics and I look at this number and he was just super intense and just super into social media. But he was, he had all his numbers and he sat with us afterwards. He was a real nice guy. So then he lost the election here, and then he went down to Florida and he ran for like 2 different offices down there.
Well,
he ran
for didn't he run for delegate? What was he running for?
I think he ran for state senator too.
Oh, did he?
I think
he ran for a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it was something here when he was living in Severna Park, and then he still continued to live in Severna Park, and he ran out in Western Maryland for Congress.
Yeah,
and then that didn't work out, and they moved down to Florida to the West Coast for a little bit.
And then he freaked out on a reporter, which was awesome. So just go to YouTube and look up Dan Bongino reporter phone call, and it's epic.
You know what, Tim? Maybe in post-editing you could find that clip and put it into here.
And here it is.
Why are you running for an office in a city you don't live in a county you don't live in district you don't live in, or you're not a registered voter in? You don't own property there.
That's against the... Can you quote me that rule where you have to do that? Oh, you can't. Again, because you're not smart enough.
Okay, so you don't actually have...
It's about politics, right?
You're not a registered voter in the district.
Right?
You're not a registered voter in the district?
You're right about politics.
Are you a registered voter in the district?
You don't know the no.
You're not. You're not a registered voter in the district. So let's see. You move down to Florida after losing 2 campaigns in Maryland. You say you're going to stay in Maryland and fight. You tuck tail, run away to Florida. You go look to run in District 18. You see you're not going to be able to win there. You try to run in District 19. You're losing there. You're like a professional political candidate who loses, Dan. You just lose.
You have no idea why I moved to Florida.
I know you moved here and you wanted to run for. You wanted to. Oh, Dad! Why are you yelling now?
Go yourself.
Oh, Dad! Is that like an offer or something? Is that an offer?
You shut your mouth.
And that was wonderful. A little bit of play acting we just did. We didn't hear it. So he blocked me and he blocked you.
He did.
And now he's on the 5 and he's just an ass.
Yeah, and this is a Secret Service. Keep in mind, what part of Secret Service do you not understand? You're supposed to honor the person that you're protecting and honor those secrets, And he just blabbers everything he can about the Clintons and I don't know. I think it's very dishonorable and he's not fit to be an elected official. So I hope he never wins.
We have a good family friend who was on presidential service, on Secret Service.
Well, he was president.
He wouldn't tell me anything about anybody.
I mean, he was presidential detail. I mean, he was the one walking. He was right walking aside the limousine in Obama's inauguration.
Dude, he's intimidating. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, he's like super ripped and like super intense whenever you talk to him.
Good. No, he'll probably come hunt me down now.
He has more time to work out.
He's probably got the resources to do it.
So yeah, he could deal with a little bit of the marijuana that's now being dispensed in the county.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Steve Shoe's bug up his ass is on that.
I don't know why he's picking fight like that. The cannabis.
He picks weird fights sometimes. Some of the stuff is strange. And I was.
What's the latest? Tell me.
Well, I mean, he's fired the hearing officer.
I don't get that whole thing. You know what?
That was designed to give the variances if needed.
I texted you going, did you see this? And then I didn't bother to read the article, so I don't understand what's going on. What's it all about?
Well, Holloman, who was the old hearing officer, was Shue apparently felt, and he says he didn't intercede with it, but there were too many variances. A marijuana dispensary comes in and says, we want to do here, and he granted the variances. Now
what's the variance? Because he can't.
Okay, well, there's a difference between I'm going to get there's two words. I'm going to say a variance and an exception. And what he's doing is he's looking for I don't know which one. Basically, one is I want you to change the rules for me because I want you to change the rules for me. The other one is like, hey, I've exhausted working within your rules and I need you to change just one little bit. Okay, so like a marijuana dispensary, it says has to be located on a primary road is one of the things.
Okay.
And it has to be located, far from a school or far from a church and all that kind of stuff. Uh-huh. So what they do is they'll sit there and they'll say that we need to meet everything except for the road. Okay, we're in an industrial park.
Gotcha.
Okay, and that road that comes off of the main road is not a primary road.
Right.
Everybody, we've talked to the neighbors. They say, yeah, we would welcome you to be here. We'd welcome you. We think we're great here. We're miles away from schools. We're miles away from wherever we need to be. We're in a perfect location. The only thing that's holding us is that this road is not a primary road. Right. And that's where they would ask for the exception or the variance. And that was, depending on the merits of it, they would do it. Now, Shoe's put in Jonathan Hodgson, who was Leopold's former county attorney under Leopold. And, he's turned down one of them already. And I just don't know what his problem is. I mean, you initially wanted to ban marijuana against the state law in Anne Arundel County. And then the rules that they established by code to have a dispensary are the most onerous in the state. You've got to have armed guards there 24/7 and everything else and cameras and videos and more stuff than you need to do in Howard County or whatever other county you're doing it. And then also the zoning thing is so restricted. It can only be in within the school, 1,000 feet of a school and churches and residences and primary roads and everything else. So there's probably I jokingly say there's probably 3 or 4 little pockets in the county where you can put a dispensary and none of them are for sale.
Right.
Well, I don't get it. So the state can legalize medical marijuana, but then the rules that are thrown up by the counties can thwart that?
Zoning. The state can't zone the county.
So, but that's just a means to an end, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's
if you have a county executive or if you have a legislator who doesn't want it, like Rhonda Pindell Charles doesn't want
right.
that, and so you can make the zoning onerous as to by default.
That's essentially what Steve Shue did initially on when he realized
it just seems like a foolish fight to pick.
I mean, it's coming down. I mean, as soon as what's he going to do when the feds come out and say, okay,
and they're going to
medical marijuana is no longer criminalized, and then they're going to
even Trump himself has softened his stance significantly this week, leaving Jeff Sessions kind of out in the wind because Jeff Sessions says no good person smokes marijuana. And even Trump himself is now starting to soften his stance. I mean, you can smell it in the air, so to speak, but it's happening.
Yeah, and you think about it, it's probably the smart thing to do because it's a taxing source, right? We're looking at needing more revenue to bridge these gaps.
Colorado and Washington State are cleaning up.
I was just in Colorado this summer. It was a really interesting experience to see what they're doing.
And the studies that are just coming out this month that are linking states and regions with cannabis use where it's legalized, that opioid addictions plummet.
That's true.
They're looking to treat opioid addiction with cannabis. I mean, the experiments are the studies are very encouraging.
Well, think about it. I mean, if it's
which
legalized,
goes contrary to the whole gateway drug concept.
Exactly, because if you're having to buy from a drug dealer, he's going to have all drug, right? Mm-hmm. And if he's out of marijuana, he's going to say, "Why don't you try this?" But if you're going into a marijuana dispensary and that's all they have, and they have it there for you whenever you want it, the likelihood of you trying something else is going to be a lot less.
I think the writing's on the. I never thought I'd see this. I never thought I'd see gay marriage. I never thought I'd see legalized marijuana. But I mean, you're looking at probably medical marijuana on a federal level. I would bet you within the next 2 years, if not sooner. And I think you're going to look at recreational marijuana within less than 5 years, and maybe even sooner than that.
Well, I know a lot of things at the National Cannabis Festival that did. Caroline Phillips, who was talking to us, I mean, they're
great episode. Go listen to it.
Their focus is to look at the legislators that are bent, and they're really looking to turn it over. And in this, maybe it's a green wave that they're looking to get as opposed to a blue wave. But I mean, when you've got congressmen and U.S. congressmen and U.S. senators coming to your educational things at the museum the day before the National Cannabis Festival, talking about how good it is.
Well, you're going to look at the gambling model. Is that if you look at any state that has gambling, the surrounding states are almost forced into that because they said, look, we're going to be losing revenues from our own citizens who are crossing state lines to do that. So if you look at any state that legalizes recreational marijuana, the surrounding states are going to go, we're losing out on all that revenue that we possibly have. You're going to see that they're going to start falling like dominoes.
Maybe Gavin could put a tax on.
I was just thinking that.
Tax on weed.
Maybe, I mean, a green tax, right?
Yeah.
Could you do that? If it's decriminalized statewide?
We're a green city, but it's not quite like that.
Actually, the one thing is going to, I know you had a question, but the one thing that's probably going to force it is the economics, because a lot of these marijuana dispensaries can't go to normal banks.
Once they relax the federal laws and the banks come into play, it is going to be a gold rush at
exactly.
that point.
That's a big issue because they have to create their own banking system, because if they deposit it into a regular bank and then they seize the assets, that could be a problem. So a lot of banks aren't even opening accounts. I know locally Severn Savings Bank is.
It's one of 3 nationwide that are dealing with it.
Yeah, and they have a plan in place. I went to their shareholder meeting on Tuesday to see how they were going to go about it. And they have a pretty smart idea. What they're doing is they're issuing treasury stock. They're holding stock in exchange for money that's deposited, so that if the money
like an escrow.
So if the money is seized, they instantly have the cash
access
on
to
hand.
it. Yeah.
It's really smart idea. I have to give them massive kudos. Whoever came up with that was really thinking outside the box.
Well, I think everyone was freaking because when Sessions came in, that sounded like it was going to be a bunch of steps backward. But again, I was surprised. I don't know why Trump suddenly started making noise about this, but if he signifies a move in the opposite direction, I think this is going to happen a lot faster than we thought. And I think it's going to solve a lot of money issues for a lot of these states.
Yeah, definitely. And they should. Yeah.
I wonder how the alcohol industry is going to react to this, though. I wonder if they're going to freak out about this.
It's a good question. I don't know. I know the tobacco industry would welcome it because they're ready to roll, literally.
What do you mean?
A lot of these, like Philip Morris, I believe, has they've got a factory with rolling machines, and they can just load in the marijuana instead of tobacco.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're ready to go. As long as they
take a pack of Marlboro on a pack of
Marlboro
pack of California
Sensimilla.
Yeah, exactly. Some Marlboro Greens, right?
That's great. That's great.
You've been sitting on that for a while.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it for us, I think, about right now. Speaking of which, I want to thank Sean for coming on board for the second try, his second attempt.
Yeah.
Attempt, you did it. I'm very proud of you. It was a drinking one. It was a quiet drinking one. We're doing this on a Sunday evening, and the cans are starting to pile up a little bit.
It's the Sabbath.
Yes, I did go to church today preparing for this.
It's sundown, though, so the Sabbath's over.
Well, you're half Jewish, right?
Can you be half Jewish?
Well, you're half Irish.
Yeah, I'm Jewish.
Are you Irish, too?
Yes.
Well,
I'm an Irish Jewish. Your mom's Jewish.
My mom's Jewish.
And
so
she talked her dad into being under the traditional Jewish thing where the child is raised.
What's the maternal line?
Actually, I chose. I got to choose a religion. I went to Sunday school and I went to Hebrew school. It was
I would too. My gosh.
So you chose Catholicism. You chose Judaism over Catholicism. I mean, they're kissing cousins, right? It's the same thing. All the guilt. I mean, it's seriously.
Yeah. Less guilt and 7 more days of presents at Christmas.
Yeah. All right. You know what? You made the smart choice. I was an altar boy for a bunch of years. Nothing happened.
No, actually, that kind of explains a lot.
In the meantime, you can go to Facebook. We have a page and we have a group, so you find us there. And we're on Twitter at MD Krabs Podcast. Is that right? At MD Krabs Podcast. John's at Annapolis. And you want to find John's podcast on Apple Podcasts and Google Play. He's the Annapolis
Daily News
Brief. God, I listen to it every day. I didn't want to kind of come down on him. But subscribe to that. Listen to him in the shower. I do, John. Listen to you in the shower, John.
And you want to also make sure you follow Sean O'Neill.
Oh, on Twitter.
Yeah.
If you want. It's Sean O21401.
And that's what he says, living in the 21401.
That's right.
He's throwing everybody off.
So you want to subscribe to our podcast and John's podcast, and you want to go and give us some reviews, you want to give us some stars, because that's what you want to do. So, Sean, thanks for coming on again. We'll have you on for a third soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them at all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.